Okay, today's lesson is going to be about square roots and cube roots. You will need your calculator, and you will need to put down a couple of examples that aren't printed on your note sheets, so make sure you have a pencil ready, and we'll begin. Squaring a number is raising that number to a power of 2. We've talked about this before. One thing that is challenging for students is when you're dealing with a negative number. We need to be careful and make sure we pay attention to whether the negative sign is inside the parentheses, like in this example. This means you're going to take a negative 2 times another negative 2. When you have a negative times a negative, it gives you a positive answer. This example is slightly different. The negative sign is actually there to represent a negative 1 times 2 that gets raised to a power. This is again slightly different because you're taking negative 1 times just the value of 2 squared. 2 squared gives you the 4, but the answer is negative because you've got this negative sign that is not contained in parentheses for these examples over here. So it works with bases that are negative 3 and negative 4, any other base that you have. Just be careful with the notation. If you're using your calculator to work on your exponents and you see parentheses, you should definitely put the parentheses in there the way it's written. If there's no parentheses, you will not use parentheses with your calculator to be able to come up with the correct value. So, we know about squaring a number. Squaring a number is actually the inverse or the opposite of taking a square root. So a square root technically gives us 2 examples. Okay? For this, here's your square root symbol. When you square root 16, you're looking for a number times itself that gives you 16, like 4. 4 times 4 is 16. There's another answer because you can actually take another number, negative 4, and multiply against itself. Negative 4 times negative 4 is also 16. So here's that work shown differently. We show 4 squared is 16, and then using parentheses, negative 4 squared is 16. This is how we sometimes write our value for when there's 2 different signs to our answer. We kind of stack the plus and minus sign on top of each other to say that the square root of 16 is plus or minus 4. We often only pay attention to the positive square root, and this is often known as a principal square root. Now for cubed roots. Cubed roots, or cubing a number, is the power of 3 when we raise a number to the power of 3. The inverse, or the opposite, is taking the cubed root. So what you'll notice between square root symbols and cubed root symbols, the square root symbol kind of looks like the old division sign that you used when you did long division, but it's got this little tail stuck to it. You kind of have the same symbol, but there's a little 3 in the corner. That 3 is called the index, and it tells you how many roots or how many matching factors you're going to have. So in this example, the cubed root of 8 gives us 2 because we know if you take 2 times 2 times 2, you have 3 matching factors, you'll get 8. So that's why the cubed root is 2. A cubed root can never have a negative solution because when you take a negative number, multiply by itself 3 times, you'll end up with a negative answer. So you won't have 2 different roots for a cubed root. You won't have 2 different answers like we did for a square root. Now, these examples are not printed on your note sheet, so what I'd like you to do is take the second note sheet that I gave you. It has some of this stuff on it, and what you're going to do is flip it over, and what I'd like you to do is put these examples on the back. This is how you'll use your calculator to find square roots, and this is how you'll find cubed roots. Probably should practice our square roots first. So let me just reorganize this lesson quickly. This table here, before we talk about how to actually find roots, let's go back and just practice finding squares and cubes. Using your calculator, we talked the other day about how to put in 1 squared and 2 squared and 3 squared. So go ahead, pause this video, and then you can check your answers in a second, and then we'll get to the cubed root and square root stuff. Alright, Alright, so solutions, when you square your numbers, remember it's 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, 4 times 4. Using your calculator is very quick and easy because you just have those buttons to push. Cubed roots, remember you do have to use your caret button. So 1 cube, caret 3, 2 caret 3, 3 caret 3, and so forth. You'll get all these numbers. These numbers are important to have on your note sheet because of what we will talk about next. Now, finally, here's what I wanted you to learn today on your calculator. So, on the back of your note sheet, you can write down a little note to yourself that using the calculator, the only way to take the square root of a number is to use the symbol for the square root, which is located in blue above the x squared button. So in order to do these examples, which you're going to write down on your note sheet, you're going to have to press second and then x squared to get that symbol to show up on your screen. So if we're trying to take the square root of 625, you actually have to press the button second, and then you have to press the x squared button. And then once you do that, you should see on your screen an image that looks just like this. And then what they do is they put a little parenthesis behind it, or in front of the number that you're going to type in. You're going to type in 625. And you do not have to close the parenthesis, unlike some programs. This one will give you your answer of 25 without that being closed. So, if you're going to practice another one, you want to this time take the square root of this decimal 0.49. So remember, you're going to have to press 2 buttons to get the square root symbol on there. You're going to have to press this second key, and then you're going to have to press the squared or x squared button. So again, this is what comes up to show that you're taking a square root. You're going to type in 0.49, and it should give you the result of 0.7. Now for the last example, you want to take the square root of the fraction 4/9. There's a couple ways to put fractions in here. I think the easiest way is if you just push 4 divided by 9. If you do that, you're probably going to get a decimal answer. Your decimal answer is 0.6 repeating. So you can either leave your answer as a decimal, or like we talked the other day, you can change that into a fraction using the button second PRB. Sometimes the fraction is easier to work with. When you hit second PRB, it should give you the fraction 2/3. And the reason you're getting 2/3, when you square root the numerator of your fraction, the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 9 is 3. So having that on your note sheet is going to be very helpful. Now for cubed roots. To do cubed roots, we actually have to move up a little bit on our calculator to find that button. The button is located above the caret key, and it doesn't really have a 3 in the corner. This button is kind of used for any kind of roots, and this year we only talk about cubed roots, so that's why we have to put the 3 on our calculator first. And that'll look like a normal size 3, unlike what it's going to look like on the problem. On the problem, it looks like a little tiny 3. And then you're going to press the button second, and you're going to press the caret button. And then what's going to come up on your screen is this image right here with a little tiny X in the corner. That X is really 3 because we typed in our 3 ahead of time. And then what's different about this is there's no parenthesis. You can go ahead and you can type in your number right away. So the cubed root of 512 is what we're practicing first. This should give you 8. Then we're going to do the cubed root of 0.125. This should give us cubed root of 0.125. This should give us 0.5. And then if we do our fraction, 8 over 27, just be sure to put parentheses around the 8 and the 27. If we don't do that in this case, it will not calculate what we want it to calculate for us. And then again, go ahead and put your answer as a fraction. So this one should come out to be 2/3 again. The cubed root of 8 is 2, the cubed root of 27 is 3. And again, you might see the decimal 0.6 repeating first, just change it to a fraction. Now, that's pretty much all you need to know as far as the calculator is concerned. A lot of these other problems you can now do just using your calculator. Some of these I wrote the factors out to help us. For example, the first one, it's -7 in parentheses squared, which means you'll take the -7 times itself. A negative times a negative is positive 49. If you do this with your calculator, just be sure to put the parentheses in, and then your calculator will give you the right result. 2/3 times itself is 4/9. And then this is an example where that negative is really separate from the number that you're squaring. We're really squaring the 9. 9 squared is 81. 81 times this -1 is where the negative comes from. Now for this one, we have a negative sign outside the square root, so that really means we have -1 times the square root of 100. If you take the square root of 100, you get 10, so 10 times -1 is -10. Using your calculator, square root of 0.81 is 0.9 again, and square root of the fraction 9/16 is 3/4. This one is having us practice some cubes and cube roots. So here is -5 in parentheses to the third power, so you should get -125. This is 1/4 to the third power, so you should get 1/64. And this is that negative separate from the number that we're cubing. We're cubing the 10, so 10 times 10 times 10 times -1 gives you -1,000. And on the bottom, we have to take the cubed root. So remember, you're using the 3, the second button, and then the caret button to get this in there. It gives you 6. This has a negative sign separate, so we just know we're going to get a negative answer when we find the cubed root of 512. And then the fraction. Again, put parentheses around the fraction when you type this in so the calculator understands what you really want. And at the very bottom, there's some word problems. It talks about a group of 25 students needs to be arranged in a square formation. The reason it comes out square is that 225 is considered a perfect square. We need 15 on both sides of this formation. So that means we have 15 students in a row. We have 15 different rows. You could use your square root feature to figure that out also. For the last one, we're dealing with volume. Volume is three-dimensional. Remember, we talked about length times width times height. We know it's a cube also, which means the length, the width, and the height have to be the same value. So we can just take our volume and we can take the cubed root of that volume. The cubed root of 216 is 6. So I guess to summarize today's lesson, I would write down that you can utilize your calculator to take square roots and cube roots. There's definite buttons you have to get practice with in order to do them correctly, and that they are the opposites of squaring and cubing of exponents that we talked about earlier. So be sure to tape these into your book. Remember these examples that you're putting on the blank side of the note sheet. They should really be facing up because you're going to want to be reminded of what buttons to push. And then tape it over here on the left-hand side so you can unfold it and see the other examples that we did. This page can be taped in each of the 4 corners since there's really nothing on the back.